Good evening, hello and welcome. You're with the news today, your primetime destination news, newsmakers, talking points. The big talking point is coming from Washington, where in a short while from now, Prime Minister Modi will be meeting the US President Donald Trump. But all this comes with Trump warning that he could be signing a reciprocal tariff order that could affect India and the world. Is this another pressure tactic by the US President ahead of the Modi meet? Can India strike a tariff deal with the US? We'll have guests from Washington, New Delhi, and other parts of the world in our exclusive with Richard Haas, one of America's leading US diplomats, will also be on the show. The big story, though, that's breaking this evening is from Washington, D.C., where US President Donald Trump is set to sign a reciprocal tariffs order. Now, what exactly will this mean for India and the world is awaited, but the Trump tariff briefing is expected at 11:30 p.m. IST. Remember, this tariff briefing comes just ahead of a meeting with Prime Minister Modi that's scheduled for 2:30 a.m. in the morning. A White House source has told India today India's early steps on trade and tariff are appreciated. But what does Washington really expect out of the Trump-Modi visit or the Trump-Modi meeting? Will Washington tighten the screws on India when it comes to tariffs? What can India hope to get out of this? Could there be a trade deal of sorts between the two countries, or the states set for one? What else is on the menu? Who better to answer that than our diplomatic affairs editor, Geeta Mohan? She's in Washington at the moment, where she joins us. Geeta, tell us what is expected out of this visit, given the backdrop of the uncertainty and unpredictability of Donald Trump, again seen today in a possible reciprocal tariff order against various countries.
Well, Rajdeep, this is going to be an important one. The fact that you just mentioned President Trump is going to hold a press conference on tariff just ahead of his meeting with Prime Minister Modi. He also posted on Truth Social that this is a big day and a big day for reciprocal tariffs. So it just means that he is going to have, he's really going to push very hard the Indian administration and Prime Minister Modi. But before I talk further on tariffs, what you see behind me is the Blair House, and National Security Advisor Michael Walsh just walked in. The meeting is to begin between the National Security Advisor and Prime Minister Modi, the first meeting of the day, followed by Musk, then Vivek Ramaswamy, and later in the day with none other than President Trump himself. Now, going back to the tariffs, Rajdeep, it is going to be a very difficult negotiating diplomatic walk for Prime Minister Modi because it does seem like President Trump is very determined that should the tariffs continue and not in order of or in the manner in which the US wants it, then there is reciprocity that India will have to face. And that's certainly something that will be messaged out in the press conference.
Very quickly, what are India's options? I'll be going to Richard Haas, former top American diplomat, in a moment, but I want to ask you, how is India viewing this? Is there a sense of a concern or uncertainty in the air, given Donald Trump's record of springing surprises?
Well, Rajdeep, we were just in a background briefing with a senior White House official, and he said to a question on what India's options are and how is the U.S. administration looking at it. The steps that India has taken in the budget, reducing tariffs on certain things, especially motorbikes, is a step forward, is a way forward, and the U.S. administration appreciates it. But that they do not want to get ahead of President Trump, and that there is a lot of work that needs to be done. So it doesn't seem like for now it's an easy walk for India on the trade path, but there are certain other aspects where there can be give and take. And in that, if the United States of America wants the kind of defense deal that President Trump is looking at, there might be some concessions that the U.S. administration will have to give India to ensure that they continue getting the kind of money, the billion-dollar deals that they expect from India.
Okay, we'll leave it there, Geeta. We'll come back to you, of course, for much more. Harley-Davidsons is what India is willing to sort of reach out to Trump on cutting import duties, and apparently President Trump likes his Harley-Davidsons. We'll find out more, because in a moment I'm joined now by Richard Haas, former American diplomat. He's been someone who's been a leading figure on various diplomatic issues across the world. I appreciate you joining us, Mr. Haas. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. You've been a former President Emeritus, also on the Council on Foreign Relations. Just want to understand from you, first, let's talk about the importance of this meeting between the two principals. Prime Minister Modi, among the first leaders to meet President Trump since he took over. I think he's the fourth leader. What's your sense? Is India priority for this administration, or is Trump simply trying to strike deals with various countries at the moment, India being one of them?
Maybe neither, in answer to your questions. India is obviously important. The president and the prime minister had a good relationship the first time around. But when you look at the world, the United States is obviously concerned about what's going on in Europe, the Middle East, the Asia Pacific. I think India is important, but it's mainly seen by this administration through an economic lens, priority being to reduce the trade imbalance that is significantly in India's favor.
So what would that mean? We've already heard a very cryptic post from the U.S. president suggesting reciprocal tariffs. Is that, you believe, an idea that is central to the Trump government's policy of making America great again, and irrespective of which country they're dealing with, reciprocal tariffs is something India and other countries will have to now live with?
The short answer is yes. India is not being singled out. It's not being penalized. We're seeing tariffs used for various reasons. We saw it against Canada and Mexico in order to get changes in their policy at the border. We've seen it in terms of aluminum and steel imports in order to protect American industries. And now there's talk of imposing so-called reciprocal tariffs to bring American tariffs up to the levels which other countries tariff American exports. I think that there is an opportunity here, though, for India. For the United States to raise tariffs to India's levels is not good for either country. Mm-hmm. A much wiser path would ultimately be for India and the United States to reduce tariffs in a parallel way. And I would hope that would ultimately be on the agenda and where the U.S.-Indian economic relationship, so rather than having a race, if you will, to the top in tariffs, let's have a race to reduce them.
You're saying a race to reduce tariffs could well be on the anvil, but Mr. Haas, Donald Trump has also pushed for reducing U.S. reliance in a way on Chinese manufacturing, trying to curb Chinese economic dominance. Could this move to sort of send out signals to China benefit India in some way? Or do you believe it will come with conditions? How should we see how America approaches Beijing?
That's a different issue. I think what's going on with China, in some cases, it's technology. The United States does not want certain technologies, advanced technologies, to reach China. Also, though, there's real concerns when it comes to China that they subsidize all sorts of state-owned enterprises. They subsidize exports. So essentially, China is an unfair economic competitor. I see that as a slightly different situation. India is obviously strategically somewhat or potentially important vis-a-vis China. A more immediate issue, by the way, we haven't mentioned it, is Indian purchases of Russian energy and Russian oil. And that has been a concern of the United States, and that might factor as we get farther into negotiations over Russia and Ukraine, because that's a potential source of leverage.
It's interesting you just spoke about Russia and Ukraine at the moment. The president has had several phone calls in quick succession, we are told, with Russian President Vladimir Putin and with the Ukrainian President Zelensky. Are you seeing that to be the priority at the moment of the Trump administration when it looks at the world at the moment? Let's end the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, then we'll deal with the rest of the world? Gaza and Ukraine?
I think that's fair enough. When it comes to the world, those are probably the two immediate priorities, Ukraine and Gaza. I think the bigger priorities, though, are domestic. Mm-hmm. All the things that are going on here in terms of executive actions to reduce spending in certain areas, to reverse some policies that were inherited, to increase the authority and power of the president. So I think there's a domestic focus right now, but I don't take issue with your point that the two pressing international issues, most pressing, are probably in Europe, given the war with Ukraine, and in the Middle East. And the Middle East could be two things. It could be diplomatic possibilities with Iran, as well as the entire question of Gaza.
What does what do you think is the best case scenario for India from an Indian perspective from a Trump administration? We have the US-India Defense Cooperation Act in place. Could there be transfers of technology? Do you believe that it's a give and take with the Trump administration, quid pro quo? You accept what we say on tariffs and we'll give you benefits on defense technology transfers, for example.
Well, Mr. Trump's history and his pattern is to be transactional, to basically have quid pro quos, gives and takes. But I could, again, I think the most pressing bilateral issue between us is to reduce the trade imbalance, to get India to reduce some of its tariffs. And again, I would think there's an opportunity ultimately to avoid American tariff raising and to get India to lower its tariffs. I would think that would be the best thing economically for the relationship. If we can also continue to broaden the strategic relationship, that would be well and good. And by the way, there's a lot of bipartisan momentum there. This does not need to be invented. The U.S.-Indian relationship, as you know, has come a long way in recent decades. And I don't see anyone arguing that should stop. The real question is how far and how deep it can go, and that's really up to both countries.
But am I right in saying that you believe that the Trump administration would rather prioritize, therefore, a stronger economic partnership, which is a win-win for both, rather than, as some previous governments in recent times have done, to strengthen Quad, focus on regional strategic partnerships? Do you believe that's not top of the mind of this administration? This administration, at least for now, is singularly focused on promoting American economic interests. And therefore, India has to learn to deal with a very different kind of American administration.
Look, the two need not be mutually exclusive. One can promote security or strategic interests as well as the economic. But I think all things being equal, you're essentially right. That this administration's international priority is more on economic issues, hence the emphasis on tariffs. Also, the United States and India do not have, at the moment, a big diplomatic issue dividing them. We don't have the equivalent of what the United States and Russia have over Ukraine, or what the United States has with several countries over, say, Gaza, or with Iran over nuclear weapons, or with China over Taiwan. So I think for the United States and India, probably the central feature of the relationships are more related to things economic than things strategic.
One of the concerns, of course, Mr. Haas, that India has is that H-1B visas, critical for expanding our IT force. Donald Trump's administration has sent mixed signals on the issue of expanding H-1B visas. Is that the kind of issue that you believe India can take up with the Trump administration, or is this an administration very clear because of its sort of make America great again credo, it will be reluctant to expand H-1B visas to Indian IT force workers?
Well, from all reports, the administration is divided on that. I think there's a consensus in the administration to be tough on border enforcement, particularly on the southern border. But questions of legal immigration and the potential to expand H-1B visas probably divides this administration. There's those from the technology sphere who are all in favor of it. Others who simply tend to oppose immigration no matter what. So that seems to me an issue that, how can I put it? That could play out in different ways. And I think it's in the interest of both countries. I happen to be in favor of increased numbers of H-1B visas. I think it's good for us. I think it's good for India and others. So I would hope there could be a meeting of the minds there. And I don't. My own view is the administration is not close to that.
Let me ask you, therefore, in conclusion, if you were to give any advice to Prime Minister Modi, in his first term, he came to America and said, "Ab ki baar Trump sarkar." We want a Trump government. And this was 1 year before the US presidential elections. Guess what? Joe Biden becomes president. There was some concern over going over the top, if I may use the word, in sort of embracing Donald Trump. Now, what would your advice be? How should the Indian Prime Minister be dealing with this Trump 2.0?
I've known the Prime Minister of India for over a decade now. And one of the many things I've learned is I would not presume to give him advice. He's got a good relationship with the president. This relationship has evolved significantly under presidents of both parties in recent years. I would hope the two countries could expand They have strategic cooperation, and I would hope they could reduce some of the economic frictions between them. And as we just discussed, I would like to see an expansion of the H-1B issue. So I think there continues to be lots of upside to the U.S.-Indian relationship, and it's one of the rare areas. One of the good things, it's a rare area of bipartisan support in this country, where Democrats and Republicans alike favor a more robust, more important U.S.-Indian relationship. So Prime Minister comes here pushing on an open door.
You know, the reason I asked you that last question, Mr. Haas, was I thought as someone who knows both the principles, what is the way to Donald Trump's heart? I think the world is still guessing what's the way to Donald Trump's heart. How does someone like Mr. Modi, who otherwise, you know, has shown himself to build personal chemistry as an element of diplomacy, what's the best way to Donald Trump's heart at the moment?
Well, again,
give him a Harley Davidson.
I'll leave that one to you. Look, this prime minister has forged a good relationship with this president, and it's not obvious to me he needs the advice from me or any other American. And again, he's arriving here where there's mainly one set of frictions over the trade imbalance, over Indian tariffs. So I think India is going to ultimately have to make some big decisions about opening up its economy. Those are India's decisions to make. Those are sovereign decisions. I think in the long run, it would be good for India as well as good for American exporters, as well as for our bilateral relationship. But that's up to the Indian leadership to decide. And as I said before, I think both countries would benefit rather than from reciprocally raising tariffs to in parallel lowering tariffs.
Richard Haas, for giving us your perspective from your vantage point. I appreciate you joining me here on India Today. Thank you very much. Richard Haas, one of America's leading diplomats, joining us there from New York, giving us a sense of what could lie ahead. Not easy to deal with Donald Trump at the moment, because every day, as we call it, tracking Trump is a bit of an occupational hazard. You never know what he's going to do next. And today, his decision comes amidst trade and tariff tensions. Remember, hours before his meeting with the Indian Prime Minister, as I said earlier, Trump's post on Truth social media has set off a big buzz. The US president indicating that he will announce a list of countries on which reciprocal tariffs will be imposed. The big question, therefore, will tariffs dominate the talks with Prime Minister Modi? Take a look.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Washington, D.C., his first visit to the U.S. since Donald Trump's return to White House. The bilateral meeting between the two leaders, who have had a warm relationship in the past, takes place under the shadow of American threats to hike trade tariff on India. Barely hours before the meet at the White House on Thursday, President Trump declared on social media website Truth Social that he would be signing an order on reciprocal tariffs.
It's very simple logic as to why the president wants to impose reciprocal tariffs. It's the golden rule, which we all learned when we were growing up in school. Treat others the way you want to be treated. And far too many nations around this world have been ripping off the United States of America for far too long. And that's why the president believes this will be a great policy that will benefit American workers and improve our national security.
Tariff has been a pet project for Trump, who ran a campaign promising to make America great again.
India, which is a very big abuser, he happens to be coming to meet me next week. And Modi, he's fantastic. I mean, fantastic man. They're at the top of their game, and they use it against us. But India is very tough. China's the toughest of all, but we were taking care of China with the tariffs. So we're going to do a reciprocal trade.
After taking over as the president, Trump has repeated his pledge.
I always say tariffs is the most beautiful word to me in the dictionary, because tariffs are going to make us rich as hell. It's going to bring our country's businesses back that left us.
Trump has already announced a 10% tariff hike on Chinese goods, and followed it up with a 25% tariff on steel and aluminium this Monday. He has kept on hold the 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada till March 1st. India would be trying to strike a deal with the US on tariffs by lowering duties on specific products. Prime Minister Modi's talk with Trump takes place a day after the American president spoke to his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, about finding ways to end the Ukraine war. From visas to tariffs to the wars in Ukraine and Gaza. The two world leaders will have lots to discuss. With Geeta Mohan in Washington, D.C., Bureau Report, India Today.
Okay, folks, we're calling it the T word. The T word is not just Donald Trump, but tariffs. At the moment, though, Prime Minister Modi is meeting the US NSA, Michael Walsh. That meeting has begun. Michael Walsh is someone that India knows well. He's been involved in the past in defense negotiations involving India and the United States. So it's not a meeting which the Prime Minister would not have known his counterpart at. Remember, next is a meeting with Elon Musk, who's, of course, become almost the voice of President Trump, especially on social media. And it'll be interesting to see what that meeting holds. But those were pictures that just came in of the meeting between Prime Minister Modi and Mr. Walsh, the US National Security Advisor. Let me raise some of the big questions, though, tonight. Are we seeing Trump's pressure tactics with tariffs ahead of the Modi meet? Can India and US strike a tariff deal? Could we lower tariffs with the principle of reciprocity? And does India have a plan B if Trump pushes us too hard? How does one tackle someone who seems to be a complete disruptor of politics and economics like Donald Trump? These are some of the questions I want to raise. Arun Sharma is advisor to the World Bank president. He's based in Washington, D.C. Dan Morrison is journalist and author based in New York and someone who's written extensively on Donald Trump. Meera Shankar is former Indian ambassador to the United States. And Gil Bardonalal is senior research fellow, Center for the Study of Statesmanship in Washington. I appreciate each of you joining us. I want to come to each of you one by one. Arun Sharma, to you first. Let's talk about this T word. Tariffs is the word, the buzzword at the moment. The US president suggesting he's going to go in for reciprocal tariffs with several countries. A list of that might come later tonight. Is that something India should be concerned about?
Well, India has to be concerned about them because there is a reason why every country imposes tariffs and seeks to protect its industries. The United States is doing it now. India has been also doing it to protect its critical industries that need protection from competition that is currently unfair because of the state or development of certain industries. But what is interesting to note is that it's not a very uniform impact on all sectors and all industries. And there are certain tariffs that are being imposed across the globe on steel and aluminum, so that impacts all countries, and India is going to get painted with that same brush, has already been painted. The issue is really for Prime Minister and the whole country really to be concerned about is which are the industries where it's going to be politically difficult to open the market in a way that is difficult for us. I give you an example: medical devices or agricultural commodities. Those are pharmaceuticals. Those are things that are critical to public good in a country like India, where the purchasing power is limited and the social protections are limited. And these are fundamental to the well-being of the population. So managing those issues is very, very important. But if reciprocal tariffs come, I would say that that's a window of opportunity for India to actually press for reduction of tariffs from all types and then adjust our domestic policies to make sure that our industries can compete and then find ways to essentially supplement and ease the pain that an easing of tariff might cause to certain domestic industries, for example, that could be impacted by them.
You know, but you make an important point, which I want to take to Meera Shankar. What if President Trump tomorrow says, I want across-the-board tariffs, or I want tariffs on agricultural commodities, medical equipment, pharmaceuticals? Can India resist that kind of pressure at the moment? Do you believe it's possible for India to resist the pressure? There were signs even in the budget that India was willing in some way to almost adjust to some of the demands that the Americans were making.
Well, first of all, let's look at the two-way trade between India and the US. In goods and services, it's around little less than $200 billion. And the trade surplus that India has enjoyed with the US has been modest. It's been broadly balanced. It's been the surplus.
The US believes with you, man. US believes that the trade surplus that India has with them works against American interests. What if Donald Trump raises that tomorrow and says across the board, I want tariff cuts?
Well, I don't think it will proceed like that, but certainly he would want India to buy more. And he also mentioned specifically in his call with Prime Minister Modi that he would like India to buy more defense equipment. So that is certainly an area where India would be more than happy to pick up things which it needs. Similarly, in the field of energy, there are opportunities. New opportunities, because Trump has gone back on the renewables policy, but he's stepping up fossil fuel production. So that might be something which India could take more of from the US. And also, I think India is keen to cooperate in development of small modular nuclear reactors. So and then in the whole field of critical and emerging technologies as well, where we like the US to ease its regulatory framework, because on the one hand, they want us to buy more. On the other hand, they put restrictions on the items that we would like to buy. So I think there's going to be give and take.
You're saying, ma'am, I'm just going to stop you. You're saying there's going to be give and take, but I just want to stop you because I want to understand the other perspective. Gil Bandollar joins us, senior research fellow at the Center for Study of Statesmanship in Washington. Is there an asymmetry in the relationship? America under Trump 2.0, particularly in his first 100 days, wants to call the shots. Can India resist it?
Yeah, I think there's an asymmetry, but I think, as you said in your previous segment, watching Trump is a full-time deal, and the unpredictability is tough for world leaders to deal with. But I think in a lot of ways, Trump is often easily mollified. I mean, we saw with the Mexico and Canada tariffs some largely symbolic announcements. In fact, in some cases, just restating things that were already going were enough to kind of keep the wolf at bay, essentially, for at least for a couple of months while they figure out what's going on.
So are you saying that even if he puts a high tariff, if the demands he makes are only an initial negotiating tactic?
Oh yeah, I think that's been clear over and over again. I think whether India does something very kind of small bore and symbolic, there's talk in the U.S. press about kind of favorite industries in Republican states, pecans and bourbon and things like that, or Harley Davidson is kind of a flashpoint, even though the actual volume of trade with India and in motorcycles is minimal. Little things like that can at least buy India time to negotiate and think about big picture issues like weapon sales or liquefied natural gas.
Dan Morrison, as a journalist and author there, give us decode Trump for us. Is Trump 2.0 very different from Trump in his first term? We seem to find him to be a man in a hurry. Over the last few days, he seems to be all over the place, throwing up one executive order after the other. Should that make us in India a little wary this time?
They are moving with speed and purpose on every front. And that you can see that here on the domestic front, where they're seeking to eviscerate and reduce and demolish entire government departments in the name of cutting the budget, and plenty of other actions, both symbolic on the culture war front and very real when it comes to the workings of the U.S. government. And you see that as well in their moves in Gaza and on Ukraine. At the same time, as has been mentioned, this is also a president who enjoys some pomp, and he enjoys symbolic victories. And so that's the needle that'll be threaded today. What is the prime minister bringing to Trump that might slow down our own retaliatory tariff train?
So you're saying you've got to offer Trump a sweetener, is it? You're saying India will have to offer Trump some kind of a sweetener, mollify him, and buy time and then see how the relationship goes. Is that the way you see dealing with Trump is about give and take constantly?
Bring some cookies. Yes, definitely.
Arun Sharma, as you said, the concerns in India are about areas like agriculture, commodities. Will we make concessions in key areas? On the other hand, there are those who say, look, when it comes to defense technology, there's much that India can benefit from the Americans. What is it that we should be worried about? Because when Prime Minister Modi went to the United States under Trump 1.0, there was a euphoria around Ab Ki Baar, Trump Sarkar, as I said earlier. Should we be more wary this time?
Well, I think the important thing this time is not worry, but to really change the tone of the discussion to a more positive one. I think what has been underplayed is, and in the media as well, I would say with due respect, is the amount of potential that India has created for U.S. exports. Under the PLI scheme of the Prime Minister, it was announced in the budget, there's enormous incentives for manufacturing companies to actually undertake capex, and there's a huge amount of possibility for U.S. exporters to actually really play to that opportunity. And one of the challenges of the U.S. being based here that we see is that a lot of very high quality but relatively small U.S. companies really don't have that kind of access in terms of information and in terms of opportunities to engage. That would really increase U.S. exports to a next level.
Give me an example. Give me an example of an industry where you feel the United States could actually have a potential relationship with an Indian partner.
Yeah, so advanced technology for renewable energy or broadly the energy sector is one. There are a few companies like that. There are companies in the defense space, there are companies in the high technology, in the fintech space, for example. There are entirely open areas in the financial services industry where actually the U.S. presence there is minuscule compared to what it could be. I could go on and on. But the point is also, on the other side, I think what we have also to emphasize is the opportunity India has offered to big e-commerce players like Amazon, like Walmart, using through Flipkart and so on, where actually it's a fantastic bilateral win. Amazon is probably more successful as an export credit agency for India than anything else we have done at home, simply because they're allowing our SMEs to be able to export globally using their platform. Similarly,
I take your point, but Meera Shankar, Trump has previously described India as a tariff king, abuser of tariffs, and we saw in the past that there was a lot of hard deal in Trump 1.0, a lot of heartburn that we couldn't have a trade deal with the United States. It didn't happen. Could things be different? Is Trump 2.0 someone we'll find even more difficult to deal with in your view?
See, let me put it like this, that from India's point of view, we would like to situate this discussion in the context of the strategic partnership to get a sense of how Trump sees it and how we see the future trajectory going together. I think these issues will come up because Trump's domestic agenda, which is to make America great again, bring back manufacturing to the US, rubs up against other countries, and they have to find a way to deal with this.
He's transactional, ma'am. You just heard Richard Haas saying Trump's primary agenda this time is the economy, to get America's economy back on track.
Right, if I may say, the right mixture would be a combination of the ability to be firm in areas where it hits you and hits your national interest, and on the other hand, to be flexible about seeing where there are potential areas of accommodation or mutually beneficial.
So ma'am, if Trump tomorrow says that on agriculture produce, I expect you to reduce your tariffs, how does India turn around? What does India say?
I think India would not be able to do it across the board. And I think the US understands that our agriculture is of a subsistence type where most of the farmers barely have 2.5 acre farms and are living at a subsistence level. But there are commodities we have bought from the US which we don't produce in India. For instance, we buy almonds, we buy pistachios, and this matters a lot in California to the farmers. So like that, we can consider certain products which are not really produced in India and which don't hit our farmers.
So you're saying very specific tariffs on very specific products is how we can sort of get into some kind of negotiations with the Trump administration at the moment. I just want to for a moment pivot, because remember, Trump, it's not just the Trump-Modi meeting, there's also Elon Musk who's on the menu at the moment. Dan Morrison, what do you make out as a journalist over the last few weeks in America, looking at the way Elon Musk has emerged almost as an alter ego to Donald Trump?
He's behaving, as the hand of the king. The president has declared very clearly that Elon Musk has his full support in his actions to find waste and to reduce radically the footprint and the size of the federal government and the federal workforce. This is the richest man in the world. This is Donald Trump's biggest campaign contributor, and he's acting forcefully and with the support of Donald Trump. We're in for a wild ride here.
So that we've got two meetings which are going to take place back to back. Elon Musk is first, and then is Donald Trump. Gil Barndollar, the word used again and again with this Trump administration in the context of Musk and others is transactional. It's all about, let's do business with, we will do business with you if you meet us more than halfway. Do you see Elon Musk almost also playing some kind of a role in these diplomatic outreaches, or is the best way out only to deal with Trump?
No, it certainly appears that way. I mean, we've got a probably unprecedented situation in American history here, where people are not totally sure who's in charge and who's calling the shots, and I think there's probably, I suspect, in foreign capitals an element of kind of Kremlinology, of trying to figure out who actually is close to Trump, who speaks for him, what those unofficial kind of power networks look like. And I think obviously Elon Musk is front and center in any conversation about that.
Yeah, Meera Shankar, this is a real test for diplomats, isn't it? When every day you are getting some disruptive executive order or the other, tracking Trump must be sending our diplomats scurrying around in Washington and other places. You don't know when he's going to hit at you. One day it's Russia, one day it's China. He's got an order a day. Keeps the world uneasy. How do you deal with someone who's a natural disruptor?
Well, there's an element of unpredictability which always makes, navigating the relationship certainly not a smooth or easy task. You have to constantly be on your toes. So I think it'll keep them alert.
Keep them alert. Arun Sharma, I just want, concluding remarks from all of you. To you first, what's the best case scenario you believe out of this Trump-Modi meeting? There's the Trump-Musk visuals we're showing, but out of the Trump-Modi meeting is the one that everyone's looking forward to. What's the best case scenario?
Well, the best case scenario is that the relationship is reset in a positive way, and there is already existing goodwill, but that goodwill has to be maintained through this new cycle of unpredictability, this new cycle of America first, and this new cycle of Make America Great Again. And given the relationship we have an opportunity to position ourselves, and I'm sure Prime Minister Modi is more than capable of that, in a way that we are friends, we are partners, and that these are issues that all countries face, and United States has a sovereign right to determine its own national interest. But we respect that, but we need to find ways to work together, because that, I think everybody understands, including both the leaders, that is in the country's mutual interest.
Dan, you've written in the past about India as well in one of your books. Do you believe that this President, Dan Morrison, has India as one of his priority areas? Among the leaders he's met so far, Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, then hosted Prime Minister Ishita of Japan, and held a working meeting with Jordan's King Abdullah. Does India fit in to the Trump's paradigm? Will his obsession be Russia, Ukraine, Gaza, and China to some extent? Or is India also part of the key areas that Trump will prioritize?
For this administration and for Americans in general, it's Ukraine and Gaza that matter most of all on the foreign front. India is clearly important. The Prime Minister will walk up the White House drive, today, with a salute of soldiers and airmen carrying the flags of all 50 states. It's important, but it's not on the same order as these conflicts.
Let me therefore ask you in conclusion, Meera Shankar, and I know Richard Haas escaped and ducked that question. If you had one piece of advice to give Prime Minister Modi as he meets Elon Musk first and then President Trump, what would you say? Be careful. Not too many hugs this time. No up ki baar, Trump Sarkar.
I think Prime Minister Modi will try to re-establish a connection with President Trump, which will make it easier for the two countries to navigate. I think that will be one of his primary purposes during this visit.
So you're saying build on the personal chemistry. You're saying make this first visit about ensuring that the personal chemistry is intact. Many people believe they're very similar figures. Many of them are seen as these populist strongmen. Each one saying make America great again. Another one says India first, Viksit Bharat. Does that make them clash with each other? Or do similar people attract each other is the question.
Yes, they are similar, but I think their ideologies are also similar to some extent. You know, Prime Minister Modi has Make in India, Trump has his Make America Great Again, and they are both conservative parties. So I think Trump has shown that he's a bit uncomfortable with leaders who have a differing ideology to him. So I think this itself places the discussion on a less
but how do you make America great again and make, the two leaders want to, competing nationalisms can be dangerous at one level as well. You can find areas of cooperation, but at the heart of it, both of them need to address their respective domestic audiences.
Yes, but I think the issue will be, can they work together to ensure that to some extent both countries benefit mutually from the relationship?
Okay, let's leave it there. Let's leave it on a positive note. It's the first meeting since the new Trump government came into power of Prime Minister Modi. One thing about the Prime Minister, he's known to personalize diplomacy. So expect him to give Mr. Trump a bear hug. How Mr. Trump responds to the hug is another question, or whether he uses the T word constantly through their meetings. T for tariff. Thank you all very much for joining me from Washington, New York, and here in the national capital. The top domestic headline today is coming from Imphal, where 4 days after N. Biren Singh resigned as Chief Minister, President's rule has been imposed in Manipur. The state's assembly has been placed under suspended animation. Singh, remember, stepped down on Sunday, just a day before his government was to face a no-confidence motion called by the opposition Congress and a crucial protest that preempted a political showdown. But remember also that his resignation came nearly 2 years after ethnic violence erupted in Manipur in May 2023. More than 200 people have died, and there has been mounting pressure both from the opposition and indeed a section of the BJP itself, which has been relentlessly demanding his removal. The government was looking for a consensus candidate to replace Biren Singh, hasn't found one, and they've decided to go ahead and impose President's rule in the state. Remember, one of our new additions to our show is our daily India Today fact check. We intend to take our fake news and misleading content on the internet and bring you the true picture. Today's fact check is a video doing the rounds claiming French President Macron snubbed Prime Minister Modi. Take a look. AI Sana with you.
You are watching Fact Check segment where we bust fake news. Paris AI Action Summit. Many on social media claimed that French President Emmanuel Macron ignored PM Modi at the summit held on 11 February. The video clip suggested that Macron shook hands with JD Vance and greeted all the other global leaders except for Modi. India Today Fact Check, however, found that Macron did not ignore Modi during the event. On the contrary, Modi walked into the summit with Macron himself. Macron also invited Modi to the stage and greeted him with a handshake and a hug. This fact check on viral fake news is done by India Today's team Afar. This is AI Sana signing off.
Okay, let's leave you with our good news today's story. Jharkhand gets its first rowing center. It's going to train tribal kids from across the state and hopefully make Jharkhand India's rowing capital. That's our good news today's story. You watch that. Stay well, stay safe. Good night. Shubhratri. Jai Hind. Namaskar.
Jharkhand gets its first rowing centre. The coaching academy on Dimna Lake near Jamshedpur is run by Tata Steel Rural Development Society. 26 youngsters are undergoing training at the centre. All trainees are tribals from nearby villages.
मैं 1 साल हो गया सीख के, और पहले तो रोइंग नहीं पता था, फिर ऐसे आते जाते देखे थी कि रोइंग होता है बोल के फिर ज्वाइन किए, फिर अच्छा लगा। खुश तो बहुत हूँ कि बोर्ड में अकेले चलाती हूँ, डर नहीं लगता है।
हमें अच्छा लगता है कि हमें यहाँ ट्रेनिंग दिया जाता है। हम यहाँ पासी के गांव से हैं। इसमें शरीर भी तंदुरुस्त रहता है और इसमें आगे जाने की बहुत चांस है। हमें खुशी है कि आगे तक पहुंच सके।
यहाँ रोइंग सीख रहे हैं, टीएसएफ के तरफ से हम लोगों को सिखाया जा रहा है और हम लोग सीख रहे हैं। हम लोग को बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है क्योंकि टीएसएफ ने हम लोग को मौका दिया है रोइंग करने के लिए।
The coach is impressed by the progress made by the trainees.
उनके अंदर एक जो रॉ बोलते हैं ना कि अंदर से उनका एक जोश होता है, बट उनको सिर्फ ये है कि मेहनत बहुत कर सकते हैं, उनको सिर्फ हमें एक प्लेटफॉर्म देना है और आगे लेके आना है। इनके अंदर ये जज्बाती बहुत है और क्योंकि ये डिमना है तो यहाँ के जो आसपास के जो बच्चे हैं, गांव के बच्चे हैं, सबको स्विमिंग आती है। हमारे पास लड़की लगभग 17 है और बॉयज भी लाइक 15 जैसे, टोटल 30।
The athletes dream of representing their country one day.
चलो हाथ पुल करो। Yes, पावर के साथ। Very good.
With Anup Sinha in Jamshedpur, Bureau Report, India Today.